Whenever someone burns out, fails, or falls through the cracks, society immediately demands a clean verdict. We have an overwhelming cultural reflex to categorize the failure. We want to know definitively whether a broken system crushed them or if they were simply too weak to endure it. Leaning too far toward individual blame creates a dangerous fiction. It privatizes massive systemic harms. Suddenly, a hostile economy or a collapsing safety net is rebranded as a personal wellness problem. You are told to practice better self-care or shrink your carbon footprint, absorbing the failures of entire industries onto your own shoulders. But blaming the system for everything carries its own poison. If we attribute every outcome to structural forces, we strip away all human agency. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, a self-deception where we pretend we are helpless objects simply carried by the tide, with no choice. Both of these frameworks function as defense mechanisms. Whether you blame the individual or the system, you get a final answer. And a final answer allows you to escape the terrifying, uncomfortable weight of real freedom. Look at how this phrase is built. Was it the system that failed him? The power here lies entirely in the hesitation. That opening, was it, holds the thought suspended. This is a practice of calculated ambiguity. By inserting a pause and asking a question it refuses to answer, the phrase actively refuses to bridge the gap or provide the viewer with a clean, satisfying answer. Holding on to that live wire of uncertainty is the only honest place left to stand. It forces us to confront the situation as it is, rather than reaching for the comfort of a prepackaged moral. To understand why that uncertainty is necessary, we have to try to define the system itself. Layer 1 is highly visible, the societal machinery. We see it in underfunded recovery programs, bureaucratic red tape, and hostile economic structures. Zoom out slightly, and we hit the second layer, familial architecture. Long before we encounter the state, we inherit survival logics, coping mechanisms, and intergenerational trauma from our bloodlines. As the saying goes, numbers don't grieve. These inherited patterns operate like cold mathematical systems, cauterizing our ability to feel and drastically limiting our choices before we are even old enough to recognize them. As we widen the lens, the idea of the system absorbs everything. Social structures, family history, and psychological defenses blur together, making it impossibly complex to pinpoint a single, solitary source of failure. Push that definition to its absolute edge, and you arrive at the ultimate, invisible system, the metaphysical rules of reality itself. Martin Heidegger described this as thrownness. You did not choose to be born. You were dropped into a specific body, a specific historical era, and a world architecture that was completely assembled before you arrived. Take the block universe theory in physics, which suggests that time is a solid, static cube. In this model, the past, present, and future already exist concurrently. The timeline is etched in stone from end to end, making the sensation of free will feel like a costume worn over a predetermined path. If reality is mapped this rigidly, the geometry dictates every outcome. A predetermined timeline means the individual is totally absolved of any failure because they never truly had a choice to begin with. Pushing systemic blame to this absolute limit destroys the concept of human agency entirely. It reduces life to a spectator sport, where you are merely watching yourself happen. But that metaphysical theory slams directly into our physical reality. Even if the universe is a deterministic block, inside our narrow slice of time, the lived, somatic experience of deliberating, choosing, and bearing regret remains agonizingly real. Albert Camus proposed the absurd hero, often represented by Sisyphus pushing his boulder, as the exact model for navigating this clash between cosmic indifference and our desperate human longing for meaning. The absurd hero fully acknowledges the crushing, indifferent weight of the system they are trapped in, yet they consciously choose to persist. They keep pushing the stone. Look at this visual series overlaid on footage of moving geese. The text fragments warn against already lying to the read, a metaphor for ignoring direct physical experience. Organisms in nature display deep, embodied cohesion, regardless of the fragmented systems around them. The body remembers how to move, even when the mind feels trapped. We find true agency by consciously inhabiting the friction of the absurd, leaning into the tension rather than searching for an exit. To inhabit that friction, we have to stop looking at the individual and the system as two opposing sides at war and start looking directly at the boundary between them. Read the stanza here. What divides is the seam, bright edge, dark edge, edge. This points to a concept called relational epistemology. The dividing line between us and the system doesn't inherently exist out in the wild. We generate that boundary through our own cognitive act of sorting the world. We draw these distinctions to make sense of reality, but immediately suffer a cognitive blind spot. We make the cut, and then we lose track of the hand that drew it. We falsely convince ourselves that the individual and the system are completely separate objects. Because we are the ones drawing the line, we are hopelessly entangled with the system. Real resistance manifests through the internal transformation of our participation, which brings us back to that echoing hesitation. Was it the system that failed him? Leaving this question unanswered isn't a failure of logic. That ambiguity is the exact friction required to generate ethics, to create art, and to forge authentic human connection. As this final text states, what makes a thing is not the answer, but the space that remains, able to ask again. Meaning is found in the persistent ability to question our conditions. To be human is to stand directly in the in-between. It is the stamina to hold the live wire of uncertainty, feel the vast weight of the system, and choose to act anyway.